Hey guys, tonight we're descending, quite literally, into the filthiest chapter of British history. The Great Stink of 1858. That's right, forget glamorous palaces or grand battles. We're talking about the summer when London's greatest foe wasn't Napoleon or the Blitz, but poo. Just millions of gallons of unashamed, unfiltered, nose-hair curling sewage wafting through the city like the ghost of every bad takeaway you've ever regretted. Now, before you snuggle into your hopefully fragrant bed, do me a favor. Hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment if you've ever held your breath walking past a questionable puddle, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. So, dim the lights. Turn on a fan to create that gentle, clean white noise. Get comfortable, but let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what it's like to fall asleep with the aroma of 200,000 overflowing cesspits drifting gently in through your window? Would you have survived a Victorian summer with only a handkerchief, a weak immune system, and the vague hope that the Thames wouldn't actually kill you? How many layers of perfume, vinegar, or sheer denial does it take to walk past Parliament when the river is boiling with, well, let's call it organic matter? What did people use for toilet paper, and how did they feel about it? Did anyone try to sell air fresheners, or was that just a cruel joke? And most importantly, what happens to a city when the only thing flowing faster than gossip is liquid sewage, and the politicians trapped inside Parliament are finally forced to confront it? Because the smell was literally too strong to ignore? Congratulations. You've just woken up in July 1858, on the banks of the Thames. Your windows are open, your nose is wide awake, and history is about to get very, very real. You're roused from sleep by a heat wave and a stench so strong you'd think you angered a vengeful Victorian god. The air is thick, heavy, and suspiciously moist. Welcome to London, summer of 1858, where your morning alarm isn't birdsong, but the gentle, relentless aroma of 200 years of bad plumbing decisions. You blink awake, sticky with sweat, and the uncanny sense that the city itself is sweating with you. The window is open because you made the rookie mistake of hoping for a fresh morning breeze. Congratulations. What you're actually breathing in is the Thames, distilled and airborne, with base notes of old cabbage, expired dreams, and something medical. You try to roll over and pull the bedsheet up. But even the fabric seems to have absorbed that sweet, historical funk. Welcome to the world's least popular essential oil. Victorian odor sewage. Down on the street, the city is already awake and pretending this is all very normal. People shuffle past, pinching their noses with handkerchiefs, scarves, and for the truly desperate, the sleeve of yesterday's shirt. Your neighbors don't even bother greeting each other with a good morning anymore. It's more of a mutual nod, an unspoken pact. We're all in this together, and nobody is judging you for bathing in vinegar. You stagger to the window for a bracing breath of what might generously be called air. Instead, it's like inhaling the warm exhale of a giant who just ate a questionable seafood pie. You scan the horizon. Every roof, every chimney, every patch of London is wrapped in a shimmering haze, the kind that makes you long for a good, honest plague just to break up the monotony. Somewhere in the house, a fly is having the best day of its life. You envy its enthusiasm. You consider moving somewhere else. Anywhere else. But remember, this is the 1850s. And if you want to relocate, you'll have to carry all your worldly belongings on your back, probably through a crowd of equally sweaty Londoners, all radiating their own signature scents. And besides, every street smells the same. London's perfume doesn't discriminate. You attempt to escape by retreating into your morning routine. The wash basin, filled last night from the clean water pump, already has a faint brownish tinge and an odor that suggests the pump was feeling generous with its authenticity. You splash some on your face. It's warm, it's sticky, it feels like it might actually be making you dirtier. You tell yourself it's character building, Victorian skincare, exfoliating with trace amounts of despair. Breakfast is waiting, but so is the kitchen, which is now acting as a secondary collection point for the city's atmospheric bouquet. You briefly consider eating outside, but remember the last time you did that, you had to physically chase your toast away from a flock of pigeons with unusually shiny feathers. Even the birds are thriving on whatever's floating in the air. Honestly, if someone told you that pigeons would inherit the earth after the Great Stink, you'd believe it. Every surface feels slightly damp, as if the house is trying to sweat the stink out of itself. It doesn't work. You can't help but wonder, is this what Rome smelled like right before the fall? Did Caesar wake up one morning and think, that's it, we're inventing plumbing? If so, he'd sympathize. Outside, the street vendors are gamely selling wilted vegetables and fish that look like they died of regret. Even the costermonger's famous cries are a little weaker this morning, the will to advertise dampened by the all-consuming myasma. A horse trudges by, eyes glazed with resignation. You make brief eye contact. There is an understanding, and so begins your day. Wide awake and slightly light-headed, as the city hums with the low, collective groan of 3 million souls who would give anything for a cool breeze and a functioning toilet. Welcome to London in the summer of 1858, where hope is in short supply, but the air is never, ever short of character. It's time for breakfast. Bad idea. Even the most British of teas tastes faintly of eau de sueur. Toast is hard to enjoy when you're fighting for your sense of smell and dignity at the same time. Forget jam, what you really need is a clothespin for your nose. You shuffle into the kitchen, clutching your stomach in a half-hearted act of optimism. Maybe today, you tell yourself, the milk won't smell like low tide, and the bread won't have that haunting aftertaste of river mystery. It's wishful thinking, and you know it. The cat won't even come inside anymore. She sits by the back step, glaring through the window with the expression of someone who's just realized she was born without opposable thumbs and thus cannot book a train to Scotland. As you prepare your breakfast, you realize every ingredient has now absorbed the full emotional range of London's atmosphere. The tea leaves were stored by the window, the bread spent all night rising next to a cracked pane. Even the butter seems a little more yellow than usual, as if it's tried to adapt by thickening its own skin. You pour yourself a mug of tea, hoping for comfort. Instead, the first sip tastes like hot despair with a back note of municipal regret. Your toast, valiantly crisp, is fighting a losing battle against humidity. No matter how you time it, it always emerges slightly damp, as if it's already been chewed by history. You try to spread some jam, but realize you're mostly just trying to mask the background scent of Victorian riverbank. The sugar bowl isn't any help. It's doing its best to attract every fly within a 3-block radius, all of them apparently immune to the city's new flavor profile. You sit at the kitchen table, window propped open in the faint hope of a breeze. Instead, what you get is a wall of aromatic punishment. Every neighbor's breakfast merges together in the air. Fried fish, stewed onions, burnt toast, and the ever-present perfume of the Thames. Someone somewhere is having kippers. You wish they wouldn't. Even conversation feels different now. Family members communicate in short, efficient bursts, like soldiers under siege. Milk's off, jam's moved again. Close the window. Your partner tries for a cheery, lovely day, but both of you know it's a lie. The weather might be fine, but the city is currently marinating in something you're pretty sure has never been approved by the Royal Society. On the street below, the milkman makes his rounds, dousing his handkerchief in vinegar every few minutes, like he's prepping for minor surgery. You catch a glimpse of your neighbor eating her breakfast outside, her nose buried so deep in a bouquet of herbs you can barely see her face. Nosegays are the new must-have accessory because nothing says good morning like a fistful of wilted lavender and last week's parsley. Occasionally, you hear someone gagging faintly in the distance. It could be a child, a coal merchant, or a visiting foreign dignitary regretting every travel decision. You lose your appetite, which is probably for the best. Doctors are warning people not to eat too much anyway, apparently. Digestion is dangerous when the air itself is heavily seasoned. You finish your meal, or rather, surrender to it, and look down at your plate. There's a thin film of condensation forming, a reminder that, in London this summer, even inanimate objects are sweating. You try to remember a time when tea tasted like tea, when butter tasted like butter, and when breakfast was merely a way to start the day, not an act of resistance. You step away from the table, still hungry, a little dazed, and clutching your tea like a comfort animal. The city outside is waking up, and so is the stink. And as you face the day, you realize the true challenge of Victorian breakfast isn't finding something to eat. It's remembering, despite everything, that life goes on, even if it smells like a cautionary tale. Let's talk about cleanliness. Or, more accurately, the Victorian allergy to it. In a city of 3 million, bathtubs are rare, showers are basically science fiction, and soap is for special occasions, like funerals. You rise from your questionable breakfast and glance at the wash basin in the corner, eyeing it with the same suspicion you reserve for unfamiliar cheeses. Hygiene in Victorian London is a bit like a game of chicken. Everyone wants to be clean, but nobody wants to be the first to admit they need it. You splash a handful of tepid water onto your face, just enough to convince yourself you've made an effort, but not so much that you tempt fate by actually removing your protective layer of grime. The concept of the daily bath, that most basic of modern luxuries, simply does not exist. If you're well off, you might own a bathtub, an imposing metal contraption that doubles as a laundry tub, dog bath, and, in lean times, a convenient spot to hide from creditors. But for the vast majority, the closest you get to bathing is standing in a shallow tin, pouring cold water over your head while praying the neighbors don't glance in through a window. Modesty is a luxury. Privacy, an urban legend. Soap is a rare and precious commodity, doled out as if it were powdered gold. You save it for the most critical moments, a wedding, a royal visit, or the vague hope of impressing a potential in-law. For everyone else, there's the time-honored alternative: just don't stand downwind. Children are scrubbed, occasionally, but mostly left to their own devices, which often means returning home dirtier than when they left, sporting a new rash and the cheerful aroma of riverbank. Of course, there's always the public bathhouse. In theory, it's a great equalizer, a place where anyone can pay a penny for a warm soak. In practice, it's less of a spa and more of a petri dish. You join a queue of equally desperate Londoners, clutching a towel and what little dignity you have left. Inside, the steam is thick with the essence of 100 strangers' regrets. The water is generously communal. It's been used, reused, and, in some cases, possibly brewed for flavor. You climb in and try to focus on the positive. You're cleaner than you were, and your immune system is getting an unforgettable workout. Clothing, meanwhile, is another story. In 1858, most people own a single outfit for daily wear, washed monthly if you're ambitious, annually if you're realistic. The dirt, sweat, and river fog congeal together, forming what historians now refer to as protective patina. It's rumored that a truly seasoned Victorian shirt can stand up on its own. Your shoes, if you have them, Haven't left your feet since Easter. And underwear? Let's not ruin the moment by asking too many questions. Hair care is equally avant-garde. The idea of shampooing with scented foam is years away. Instead, you use whatever's handy, ashes, vinegar, or the occasional handful of rainwater. Lice and fleas are less pests than distant relatives. Combs are cherished, partly for untangling hair, mostly for scraping out whatever the city has kindly gifted your scalp. If you're feeling adventurous, you might splash on some cologne. Lavender water if you're posh. Vinegar if you're pragmatic. Turpentine if you're on a budget. It's less about smelling nice and more about waging chemical warfare on your own body odor. Perfume vendors make a killing, selling scents with optimistic names like Springtime in Surrey or Country Breeze. But everyone knows the real bouquet is Thames. Aged to perfection. Personal space is a fantasy, so social etiquette adapts. No one comments on smells. It would be impolite. And besides, everyone is equally suspicious. You learn to breathe through your mouth, keep conversation short, and always stand upwind at parties. And so you carry on, grateful in a way, for that invisible shield of filth. Because in the great game of Victorian hygiene, sometimes the only winning move is not to play. What did people use before Charmin? The answer is whatever was closest and occasionally still alive. Newspaper, catalogues, or the kind of mystery rags that would make a modern germaphobe weep. Let's set the scene. You wake up in a world where the phrase soft, triple ply means you've somehow acquired 3 old socks. The call of nature is urgent, and, in 1858, every trip to the privy is a high-stakes adventure. You'd think in a city where the local river is an open sewer, someone would have prioritized personal hygiene. But you'd be wrong. Toilet paper? Never heard of her. Instead, you're greeted by an impressive array of improvisational supplies. There's the London Gazette, not so much for the news, but for its unique ability to disintegrate under stress. Catalogues from the local haberdasher serve a double purpose. Read about hats, then use the last page for your dignity. If you're lucky, you might score some cut-up squares of rough cloth, a family heirloom passed down through generations, and, let's be honest, probably not washed in living memory. For the creatively desperate, there's always the option of grabbing a handful of leaves from the garden, provided you're brave enough to risk whatever is crawling on them. For the truly fearless, corn cobs. Yes, the humble corn cob, favoured in the countryside, rumoured in the city. Hard to believe, but it's history's original exfoliating wipe. No one said progress was painless. But the real star of the show is the communal rag, the household cloth. It sits in the corner, ominously damp, holding the secrets of every family member who's ever needed it. The rules are simple. Use it, rinse it, return it. The problem? The rinse water comes from the same Thames, adjacent bucket that's currently hosting a family of tadpoles and possibly a discarded eel. Cleanliness is a moving target. Public privies offer no sanctuary. If you're visiting a shared toilet, expect nothing except an empty hole, questionable graffiti, and perhaps a single, sad scrap of newspaper nailed to the wall. Use at your own risk. In wealthier homes, you might find lace-trimmed cloths, delicate, decorative, and completely useless after the first go. You quickly realize that money can buy you a lot in Victorian London, but it can't buy you comfort in the loo. Then there are the unlucky souls caught out in the city. Alleyways, back gardens, or, if desperation strikes, the banks of the Thames itself. Here, toilet paper might be a fistful of straw, a spare piece of rope, or, on an optimistic day, the sleeve of an enemy's coat. Social standing is no match for nature's demands. Every now and then, the government debates sanitary reform. Committees gather to discuss public health, sewage, and, occasionally, the need for improved lavatory facilities. Nobody, however, wants to be the one to ask the big question, what are we all using down there? It's a secret too shameful for Parliament, too real for polite conversation. In the rare event that someone tries to sell a personal hygiene product, it's usually a glorified sponge on a stick, suspiciously expensive and sure to be the butt of jokes at dinner parties for weeks. Children are trained young. Wipe with what you find is a rite of passage. Small hands grab for any absorbent object, sometimes a pet, sometimes a neighbor's handkerchief. No one escapes. You quickly learn that the biggest luxury in life is not a feather bed or fine dining, it's a clean, dry rag and the peace of mind that comes with it. So next time you reach for the soft, scented, perfectly quilted toilet paper in your modern bathroom, take a moment to whisper a word of gratitude to the Victorians, who braved the privy, armed with nothing but courage, creativity, and a stack of slightly soggy newspapers. Progress, it turns out, is measured one wipe at a time. Your bathroom is a wooden shed in the yard if you're lucky. Otherwise, it's a bucket, a neighbor's bucket, or the river itself. Indoor plumbing is for the rich and the very lucky. And even then, it's mostly decorative. You greet each day with a heavy heart and a heavier bladder. Nature calls. And in 1858, it's more of a collect call, expensive, public, and not nearly as private as you'd like. The first question isn't, where's the bathroom, but which direction is least likely to lead to public humiliation? For most Londoners, the answer is, whichever way the wind isn't blowing. If you have a privy at all, it's a ramshackle affair, a drafty, spider-infested outhouse at the back of a muddy yard, perched above a pit that's been valiantly fighting the rising tide of family contributions for years. Privacy is a relative term. The thin wooden door is held shut with the Victorian equivalent of optimism, a rusty latch or a helpful stick. There's no lock, just the desperate hope that no one mistakes your frantic coughs for an invitation to join you. The wealthy, of course, have options. Some stately homes boast indoor water closets, early toilets with levers, pipes, and an impressive ability to clog at the slightest provocation. For the rich, a visit to the lavatory is a chance to admire imported porcelain and contemplate their superiority over the common man. For everyone else, a trip to the loo is a negotiation with fate. City dwellers without yards, which is most of London, make do with a humble chamber pot. A painted bowl tucked discreetly beneath the bed, only slightly less dignified than a bucket. There's an unspoken code among neighbours. Don't ask, don't tell, and above all, don't borrow. Mourning means emptying the pot out the window if you're brazen, or carried gingerly down the stairs in a parade of shame. The city even has a quaint tradition of shouting Gardeloo before dumping contents into the street. It's French for watch out for the water, which is Victorian for incoming. Apartment blocks and slums are even less glamorous. 10 people to a room, one pot between them, and a line that forms at sunrise. The unlucky last person gets the dubious honor of discovering just how long you can delay basic biology before a crisis occurs. Public toilets exist, but only in the loosest sense. If you're out and about, you might stumble upon a public convenience, a grand name for a communal shed with holes, bad lighting, and a level of cleanliness that can only be described as theoretical. Some seek relief in the city's greatest open secret, the Thames itself. The river is the ultimate egalitarian bathroom. Open 24/7, no questions asked. The only real rule is don't fall in, though some days you wonder if anyone would notice. In fact, many of London's poorest neighbourhoods are built along the banks precisely for this reason. You might not have a penny to your name, but you've got river access, a luxury if you're feeling optimistic, and a public health disaster if you're not. Of course, all this waste has to go somewhere. In most cases, somewhere means nowhere. Cesspits, those shallow pits under privies, fill up faster than anyone admits. The night soil men, London's bravest, least thanked workforce, arrive under cover of darkness, shovel in hand, and cart away the city's secrets. If you're thinking this sounds heroic, remember, they're often paid in beer and eternal regret. Even the city's finest minds have weighed in on the privy problem. Committees propose grand solutions: flush toilets for all, underground pipes, magical waste vanishing machines. But these are still just rumours floating on a hot, sticky breeze. For now, every flush, every bucket, every dump is a negotiation between gravity, shame, and a hope that maybe next year will be the year London finally figures it out. Until then, you do your business as quietly and quickly as possible, grateful for the humble privy, leaky roof, suspicious spiders, and all. Because in Victorian London, any toilet you don't have to share with a stranger is a throne indeed. London's cesspits are overflowing, literally. Some are so full, the contents bubble up into the streets like unholy champagne. The competition for worst-smelling alley is fierce, but everyone's a winner or a loser. You know you're living in interesting times when the morning walk to the bakery becomes a full-contact sport. Every block offers its own unique challenge. Puddles with the viscosity of soup, corners that glisten with suspicion, and alleyways that threaten to swallow your boots, and possibly your hope. London in 1858 is not a city, it's an obstacle course, and everyone's running the gauntlet. Step outside, and the first thing that greets you is the sight of a neighbour, wooden broom in hand, trying valiantly to herd something unspeakable back into the gutter. There's a look of resignation in his eyes, the look of a man who's lost more shoes than memories to the ceaseless tide of human progress. Each neighbourhood boasts its own champion cesspit, the local pride and shame. Some have managed to breach their brick walls, erupting with a slow, stately menace, like a volcano made entirely of regret. If you're thinking, surely someone's dealing with this, you'd be half right. Enter the night soil men, those unsung anti-heroes of Victorian infrastructure. Armed with shovels, lanterns, and an uncanny ability to not breathe through their noses, they wade in after dark to empty cesspits by hand. It's an elite club, open only to those with iron stomachs and no sense of smell left to lose. The work is dangerous and underpaid, but there are benefits, mainly that you'll never complain about your day job again. The lucky homes are the ones whose cesspits haven't overflowed yet. Most London houses have their own pit, dug out back, lined with whatever bricks could be scrounged up, and left to fill with a cocktail of waste, rainwater, and dashed Victorian ambitions. When the pit's full, you hire a night soil man. When the night soil man can't keep up, the overflow begins. First it seeps quietly, an unwelcome house guest. Then, one rainy night, the bricks give out, and the city's forgotten business is suddenly everybody's problem. The streets themselves have their own defense mechanisms: open gutters, wide enough to trip a horse and deep enough to drown your dignity. The city council claims these are for rainwater, but everyone knows they're for overflow management, Victorian code for "we have absolutely no idea what we're doing." Every so often, a carriage splashes by, and anyone within 5 feet learns the hard way that London's puddles bite back. Children make a game of it, hopping from dry stone to dry stone, awarding points for avoiding the worst puddles and bonus points for spotting something alive. Rumour has it The winning alley in Bethnal Green once hosted a toad the size of a teapot. The losers, meanwhile, are easy to spot. Shoes caked in mud, trousers mysteriously stained, and an air of existential defeat. Sometimes, after a good rain, the streets become a literal river of misery. Everything the city hoped would stay underground bursts out for a day in the Sunday. You know it's bad when even the rats move to higher ground. Shopkeepers fight a losing battle with sawdust, sand, and hopeful prayers. Perfume vendors do brisk business. But there's only so much lavender can do against a tide of history. Of course, all this overflow isn't just a minor inconvenience, it's a public health nightmare. Disease follows the stink like an old friend, and nobody can quite work out why everyone in the house has the same summer complaint. Scientists blame bad air, politicians blame the weather, and everyone else just blames the neighbors. By nightfall, the city breathes a collective sigh, then quickly regrets it. The competition for worst-smelling alley resets at sunrise, and the games begin anew. In the overflowing cesspit Olympics, there are no medals, only memories and stains that never quite come out. The Thames is supposed to be the heart of the city. Instead, it's a bubbling brown artery of doom. If you drop a sandwich in, it dissolves. If you drop a body in, well, no one notices. The river was once the lifeblood of London, a grand stage for royal barges, bustling docks, and hopeful poets. By 1858, it's better known as a cautionary tale in liquid form. The water no longer glistens, it gurgles. The surface ripples with mysterious bubbles, and the color palette ranges from strong tea to why is that moving on its own? If you're lucky enough to live nearby, congratulations. You'll never wonder what's for dinner, because the answer is always not fish. Approaching the Thames in high summer is a full sensory experience. The smell hits you first, a cocktail of hot cabbage, expired eggs, and the unmistakable tang of regret. Your eyes water, your lungs rebel, you develop a sudden, passionate urge to become a hermit in the Scottish Highlands. But Londoners are nothing if not stubborn, so you soldier on, holding a vinegar-soaked rag to your nose and telling yourself that fresh air is overrated anyway. Boats still ply the water, but nobody's fooled. The cheerful ferrymen of legend have all acquired a haunted look, eyes fixed on the horizon, hands never quite clean. River traffic has thinned to the essentials: coal barges, night soil scows, and a few desperate commuters who have mastered the art of not inhaling for 45 minutes at a time. Tourists, they've learned to take the long way round. Even the birds have developed opinions. Gulls fly higher. Ducks wear a look of existential dread. And the local eels, once the pride of Victorian cookery, are now mostly urban legends. You watch as the water burps up another victim, a suspiciously round object, which could be a pumpkin, a lost bowler hat, or something best not identified without gloves and a tetanus shot. Children dare each other to poke things with sticks, but the real dare is seeing who can stand on the embankment the longest before bolting for fresh air. Occasionally, a brave soul tries fishing. These pioneers rarely catch anything edible, but their stories are always memorable. Caught a boot last week, someone will boast. Still had the foot in it. Laughter ensues, tinged with the shared understanding that it might not be a joke. There are still those who treat the river as a public utility. Need to dispose of a dead cat, a sack of rotten potatoes, or your landlord's reputation. The Thames accepts all donations, no questions asked. The tides carry everything downstream, out of sight, out of mind, and, unfortunately, straight into someone else's drinking water. On hot days, the river's surface simmers. Locals swear you can see the myasma rising, a visible haze of airborne misery, like a malevolent ghost haunting the bridges. Some Victorian optimists insist that a quick dip is good for your constitution. These people are easily identified by their red, irritated skin and the faint glow of impending infection. Swimming in the Thames is a test of both bravery and immune system, and nobody does it twice on purpose. Medical journals of the time delicately refer to the river as unsanitary. The rest of the city calls it what it is: a biohazard. You're advised not to let your dog drink from it, and if you must cross, you do so quickly, reciting silent apologies to your ancestors. Even Parliament, perched right on the banks, isn't spared. On windless days, the stink wafts straight through open windows, disrupting debates, staining velvet curtains, and, if rumour is true, bringing more tears to the House of Commons than any speech ever could. The Thames isn't just a river anymore, it's a test of character, a citywide inside joke, and a daily reminder that sometimes progress means knowing when not to dip your toes in. So, as you glance at its murky waters, be grateful for bridges, bottled water, and the glorious gift of distance. It's the summer session. Inside Parliament, lawmakers are swaddling themselves in vinegar-soaked cloth, desperately debating sewage reform while their wigs wilt in the heat. Some threaten to flee the city, others just pass out. Welcome to the House of Commons. 1858 edition. Now with extra aroma. You can practically taste the desperation in the air. Normally, these hallowed halls are filled with raucous debate, polite heckling, and the faint scent of cigars and political ambition. But not this summer. This summer, the only thing on anyone's mind is the all-consuming stench wafting in from the Thames, sliding beneath doors, invading every velvet curtain, and assaulting the dignity of every man in a waistcoat. Parliamentary proceedings become less a matter of law and more a matter of survival. MPs from rural districts, used to the earthy scent of manure and open fields, gag and clutch their cravats. Londoners, supposedly inured to the city's charm, are seen blinking back tears and inventing new, creative ways to breathe through a handkerchief. Anyone who dares to open a window for fresh air is immediately labelled an enemy of the state. Vinegar is the hot new trend, and it's everywhere. Members dab it under their noses, soak it into their cravats, and, in at least one recorded incident, pour it directly onto the parliamentary drapes. Someone attempts to burn incense. The result is an olfactory arms race that only ends with the fire brigade being summoned and several red-faced politicians retreating to the library, where the air is only marginally less aggressive. Debate over sewage reform takes on a new urgency. What began as a bureaucratic issue, tables of statistics, arguments about funding, gentle nudges to form a committee, becomes a citywide crisis. Gone are the days of putting off unpleasant infrastructure decisions. The stench is now so appalling that politicians can't ignore it. Not when the Thames is practically trying to join the legislative process. Every session starts with some variation on "something must be done," followed by extended arguments over exactly who should do it, how much it will cost, and whether it can wait until cooler weather. The newspapers are loving every minute of it. The Great Stink silences Parliament, crows one headline. Cartoonists have a field day, sketching MPs, fainting theatrically into their top hats, or drowning in waves of brown water, while the Speaker tries to keep order. Public sympathy is, at best, mixed. Many Londoners are secretly delighted to see their betters finally dealing with the problems the working classes have suffered for decades. Every now and then, a politician tries to make a noble speech about London's historic resilience, only to be cut short by a wave of odour so intense that the front bench clears out in under 30 seconds. The Prime Minister is rumoured to have commissioned a special, lavender-stuffed nosebag for use during debates. Even the Queen, in her palace upriver, is said to have remarked that Parliament's distress serves them right for never visiting the East End. As the weeks drag on and the heat grows ever more oppressive, the mood in Parliament turns mutinous. Some members suggest adjourning until the autumn, when the smell might have frozen solid. Others call for emergency relocation to Oxford, to Edinburgh, to anywhere with breathable air. At one point, a junior member proposes passing all legislation in favour of the first person who can clear the stench from the river. But in the end, the Great Stink achieves what years of debate could not. Momentum. Faced with a city about to dissolve in its own effluence, the politicians finally approve massive funding for a modern sewer system. It is, perhaps, the most direct proof in British history that nothing gets done until everyone's noses are on the line. So, if you ever wonder what motivates real change, just remember, in the battle of politicians versus poo, sometimes it's the stink that wins. What did Londoners do about the smell? Anything, everything. Bottles of perfume, burning tar, posies tied to faces, sniffing vinegar rags, or, for the truly desperate, holding their breath from dawn till dusk. Let's be honest, Victorians were nothing if not inventive when it came to denial. The entire city is marinating in miasma, and the human race responds in the way it always has, with a combination of stubbornness, creativity, and absolutely wild optimism. Some mornings it's less, how can I survive? And more, what can I stuff up my nose today that I won't regret later? Perfume is the obvious first line of defense. If you have the means, you stockpile it like gold. Every chemist, apothecary, and entrepreneurial child is hawking bottles of lavender water, rose oil, or more questionable concoctions that smell like expired Christmas. Ladies dab scent behind their ears, on their handkerchiefs, and, in particularly desperate households, directly onto the family dog, because there's nothing like eau de poodle to distract from eau de sewer. Gentlemen try to mask it with sandalwood, musk, or whatever came cheapest at the market. By mid-morning, the city's collective aroma is a heady mix of hope, denial, and artificial flowers. For those without the luxury of perfume, there's the humble posy. Walk the streets, and you'll see Londoners clutching little bouquets of herbs and flowers, nosegays as they're called, tied tightly and held in front of every face. Fashionable ladies and construction workers alike are seen walking around with fists full of wilting lavender and mint, the modern equivalent of double masking during flu season. The trend is so universal that the price of wilted daisies skyrockets overnight. Some ambitious types invent elaborate face coverings with built-in pockets for their botanicals. The result? London, for one brief summer, is the most florally accessorized city on earth, and still, somehow, the worst smelling. But flowers and perfume can only go so far. When nature calls for stronger measures, Londoners get creative. Some burn tar or pitch in their fireplaces, filling homes with acrid black smoke that, while making it impossible to breathe, at least means you're not smelling the Thames. Others light up giant bonfires of herbs, horsehair, or, for the especially desperate, last year's tax returns. The city's skyline glows orange at night, a flickering collective prayer for olfactory mercy. Then there's the vinegar. It's the season's hottest trend, and everyone is on board. People soak rags in vinegar, stuff them under their noses, and walk around with the world's sourest moustaches. Vinegar-soaked handkerchiefs are considered de rigueur for Parliament, theatre, and the Sunday stroll. The medical establishment swears by it. Some physicians claim vinegar kills the bad air, while others quietly admit it just smells slightly less awful than the river. Children, of course, try holding their breath as a competitive sport. Groups of kids line up along the embankment, cheeks puffed, trying to set new records for not dying in July. It's a game that ends in wheezing, laughter, and a return to mum's bouquet of mint, unless someone faints, in which case they're immediately declared the champion. No matter what you do, the stink wins. The city is a laboratory of coping mechanisms, but none can outlast the river's persistence. Neighbors swap home remedies and grim jokes. Try stuffing your nose with onion, one advises. Or just leave town and never look back, another sighs. Occasionally, the wind changes, and for a moment you almost forget. Then the next wave hits, and you realize there is no true escape, only temporary victories. Still, life carries on. Londoners laugh, work, court, and complain as they always have. Coping isn't just a strategy, it's a way of life. The great stink will fade, they tell each other, someday. Until then, you just keep your chin up, your posy close, and pray for rain, or a very strong cold. Everyone's convinced that bad air is the true killer. Cholera, typhoid, and mysterious summer complaints are everywhere, and every sniffle is suspicious. If you're not worried, you're probably already dead. Victorian London is a city obsessed with invisible threats, especially when those threats are smelly. According to the latest science, and by science, we mean a combination of guesswork, wishful thinking, and a fondness for blaming the French. The most dangerous thing you can do in 1858 is breathe. Your lungs are under siege from what's known as myasma, a sort of evil, free-range fog said to drift through the streets, sneak into your bedroom, and rearrange your internal organs while you sleep. No one has ever seen myasma, but then again, you've never seen an honest politician, and you're convinced both are deadly. Doctors parade through the city armed with theories and moustaches of staggering confidence. Most recommend opening a window, unless the wind's coming off the river, in which case you're better off bricking yourself in and praying for autumn. Advice from the medical establishment reads like a dare. Don't exert yourself. Don't breathe deeply. And above all, avoid any alley that smells of boiled socks and existential dread. Of course, that's every alley. Illness is everywhere. A neighbor coughs and everyone glances nervously at each other, ready to blame whoever sneezed last. Cholera, the great equalizer, has no respect for social standing or number of waistcoats. Typhoid sweeps through families like an overzealous debt collector. Children come down with the summer complaint, a catch-all diagnosis for anything from mild sunburn to a full-on plague. The only thing that spreads faster than the sickness is the gossip about who's next. Quarantines are haphazard. If you're feeling poorly, your best bet is to stay very still and hope your family doesn't notice, lest you find yourself locked in the attic with a bowl of gruel and a firm suggestion to think positive. Should you recover, you become a minor celebrity in your street. Should you not, well, the undertaker is doing brisk business this summer. There are so many funerals. They start to blend together. Black veils, wilting flowers, and the faint, lingering scent of disinfectant mixed with despair. Public health officials are caught in a never-ending game of whack-a-mole. They hand out pamphlets with helpful suggestions like, walk quickly past bad smells, and if you see something green bubbling in the gutter, do not poke it with a stick. The wealthy hire sanitary inspectors to declare their houses safe, which usually means lighting a candle and nodding gravely while collecting a fee. For the working class, survival is more about luck and stubbornness than medical knowledge. Some families hang bunches of dried herbs above the door. Others sprinkle vinegar on every surface. And a few just give up and keep a bottle of gin on the nightstand. Prayer is popular, and church attendance spikes whenever a new outbreak is rumored. After all, you never know if that tickle in your throat is the start of something sinister or just the aftermath of inhaling breakfast. Enterprising souls make a living selling patent remedies with names like Dr. Puddlewick's Elixir of Invincibility or Miasma Begone Tonic. Ingredients are a closely guarded secret, usually because they include a mix of turpentine, chalk, and optimism. Street hawkers promise instant protection, just 3 drops on the tongue, and you can wade through the stink like a champion. Results are mixed. One user claimed to have lost his sense of smell for 3 months, which everyone agrees was the best outcome possible. Meanwhile, the real killers, germs, bacteria, and unspeakable things swirling in the city's water, remain undetected, busily running their own Olympic relay from house to house. But the myasma theory reigns supreme. So you go to bed each night with the window cracked just a little, a vinegar rag tied around your face, and a quick prayer that you'll wake up breathing. In London, that's as close to medical certainty as anyone gets. Thirsty? Good luck. The water is filtered by being poured through a cloth that may or may not be someone's old sock. Most Londoners prefer gin, beer, or giving up entirely. The year is 1858, and your relationship with water is complicated. On a hot, sticky morning, you stagger to the kitchen, longing for something, anything, to quench your thirst. You eye the pitcher on the table, knowing full well it's filled with London tap, a mixture of hope, river extract, and the faint possibility of cholera. You consider your options. Risk the Thames, drink gin for breakfast, or go back to bed and pretend dehydration is a fashion statement. If you're feeling brave, you strain your water through a bit of muslin, cheesecloth, or that mysterious square of flannel your aunt claims builds character. Does it help? Not really. The water still tastes like it's auditioning for a role as soup stock. At best, it's merely cloudy. At worst, it's got chunks. Sometimes you catch yourself staring into the glass, wondering whether what you see wriggling is a trick of the light or the universe daring you to try your luck. Bottled water exists, but only for the rich and the gullible. Vendors sell pure spring water from carts, hawking their wares with the confidence of men who know no one will ever check the source. The cleverest just fill barrels straight from the public pumps, slap a fancy label on the side, and double the price. The upper crust, meanwhile, import mineral water from distant springs. There's nothing like sipping Italian acqua santa while the river outside your window is busy fermenting shoes and misfortune. For most Londoners, gin and beer aren't so much a choice as a necessity. Weak small beer is the breakfast beverage of choice for children and adults alike. It's barely alcoholic, but the important thing is it's been boiled, which means it probably won't kill you. At least not today. Gin is reserved for when you want to forget about the water problem entirely, or life in general. The phrase "mother's ruin" isn't just a punchline, it's a way of coping. There's even a rumor that the average Londoner is 3/4 gin by volume, and no one wants to test it. Sometimes you venture out to a public fountain. If you can find one that isn't clogged, dry, or being used by a horse for purposes you'd rather not describe. The local water pump is a gathering spot for gossip, mild accusations, and, occasionally, cholera outbreaks. There's always someone loudly proclaiming the pump is perfectly safe, right up until the day the pump handle is discreetly removed by the authorities, and a small crowd gathers to mourn and speculate. If you're lucky enough to have a rain barrel, you guard it with your life. Rainwater, collected from the roof, is considered the next best thing to a miracle. Even if you have to skim off the odd feather, insect, or lost shingle, the competition for clean water is fierce. Neighbors have been known to borrow from each other's barrels by moonlight, resulting in more than a few silent feuds and the occasional backyard wrestling match. Boiling water helps if you have the time, fuel, and patience to wait. But this is a luxury, and the flavor profile, smoky with hints of last night's stew, leaves something to be desired. Some resourceful souls flavor their water with lemon, mint, or the last surviving tea bag. Most, however, make their peace with the taste of history, grit, and mild peril. So as you stare into your glass, swirling the contents and trying to decide if that's a tadpole or just a particularly confident piece of dust, remember, hydration is for the brave. In Victorian London, water is less of a necessity and more of an ongoing dare. If you really want to live dangerously, take a second glass. And maybe, just maybe, say a quiet thank you for modern plumbing before you swallow. You hit the streets. Every puddle is an existential threat. The cobblestones are slick with things better left unnamed, and each passing carriage threatens to splash you with historic memories. London in 1858 is not for the faint of heart or the weak of stomach. As soon as your boot leaves the doorstep, you're thrown into a live-action obstacle course designed by someone with a twisted sense of humor and a loose grasp of public sanitation. Every step is a gamble. Is that glistening patch simply rainwater, or is it last night's storm plus a little extra? The answer, sadly, is almost never just rainwater. The streets are alive, but not in a charming Dickensian sort of way. There's the constant clatter of horseshoes and iron-rimmed wheels, echoing off buildings as carriages careen around corners, spraying bystanders with a fine mist of water, mud, and whatever else has been festering in the gutters since the last time anyone cared. You learn to walk with purpose, always one eye on the nearest doorway and the other scanning for projectile splashes. Hesitate for a moment, and you'll be wearing eau de Thames for the rest of the day. Puddles, meanwhile, are the city's greatest mystery. Some are shallow and harmless. Others appear bottomless, with a depth and opacity that would make a Victorian soup jealous. Children dare each other to leap across, and adults simply wade through with the resigned air of people who have given up on clean socks forever. If you're lucky, you'll only lose a shoe. If you're unlucky, you might gain a pet eel, or at least something that wriggles. But puddles are just the start. The streets host a daily parade of discarded things. Wilted flowers, rotten vegetables, dead fish, sometimes only half a fish, as if the other half simply walked away. Stray dogs, and cats who look like they've seen the rise and fall of empires. And, of course, there's always the possibility of bumping into a mysterious sack or barrel. Victorian etiquette demands you never, under any circumstances, poke it with a stick. If it's leaking, don't look. If it's moving, walk faster. The air is thick with shouts from street vendors. They call out the day's specials: eels, pies, fresh milk. Each word a bold-faced lie and a testament to London's relentless optimism. Costermongers and hawkers jostle for attention, their cries rising above the sound of the river and the ceaseless complaints of customers who know better than to ask where the food came from. Every corner offers a new hazard. A fishmonger's cart tips over, sending a wave of scales and disappointment into the gutter. A coal wagon drops its load, turning the street into a slippery death trap. And always, there's the ever-present threat of what Victorians politely call night soil, suddenly making an unscheduled appearance from an upper-story window. A passing shout of Gardeloo is your only warning. A split second to duck, cover, and reflect on the bad decisions that brought you here. Even the smells change block by block, a shifting tapestry of rot, flowers, smoke, horse, and the underlying note of river. Some alleys smell faintly of hope, fresh laundry or baking bread, while others reek of defeat, a reminder that even in a city of millions, someone is always losing the battle with their cesspit. Yet somehow, life marches on. Children play games of chase between the puddles, oblivious to their mother's future laundry woes. Neighbours stop to gossip, exchanging news, rumours, and the occasional cabbage. The postman ploughs ahead with heroic determination, dodging the worst of the puddles with the finesse of a ballerina. Street life in Victorian London is chaos, but it's also community. A strange, fragrant dance where everyone learns, one misstep at a time, how to survive, or at least laugh, in the face of regret. Someone has to fish things out of the Thames. Unfortunately, that someone is you. From lost hats to questionable barrels to the occasional unclaimed leg, every shift is a masterclass in not asking questions. You start your day at the edge of the river, boots squelching on the bank, eyes already watering from a cocktail of hot sludge and fresh regret. Victorian London has discovered that rivers make great highways, rubbish bins, and, occasionally, convenient evidence disposal sites. The river police, an elite band of optimists with strong stomachs, are all that stands between the city and total aquatic chaos. As a Thames constable, your job description is simple. Whatever shouldn't be in the river, get it out. In reality, that means a never-ending parade of floating objects, some mundane, some alarming, all unwanted. The lost hats are the best part. Every day brings a new variety. Bowler hats, bonnets, battered top hats, bobbing merrily in the current, like a parade of tiny, drowned aristocrats. You develop a sixth sense for spotting good salvage. A decent hat, cleaned up, can fetch a nice price at the market, provided you don't mention its recent swim. Then there are the barrels. You learn very quickly that it's best not to look too closely. If a barrel is floating upright, you haul it out, drain it, and hope it's only full of spoiled fish or beer gone very wrong. If it's sideways, you prod it with a pole, say a silent prayer, and only open it if you're sure you're up to date on your shots, which, in 1858, means nothing at all. The worst are the ones that move or make noise. That's usually a sign to push it downstream and let someone in Greenwich deal with it. And then, of course, come the bodies. The river gives up its dead reluctantly, sometimes in pieces, always at the worst possible time. The river police try to keep things professional, tag, bag, and send for the coroner, but everyone knows it's only a matter of time before you fish out something that makes even the most hardened sergeant reconsider his career path. There's a running bet in the office: whoever finds the most bizarre item wins a free pint and the right to not speak of it ever again. Animals, too, make regular appearances. Dogs, cats, eels as thick as your arm, and once, famously, a piglet in a bonnet. No one ever claimed it, and for months afterward, the river police received anonymous letters addressed to Mrs. Snuffles, Thames resident. You learn quickly that the line between lost property and folklore is blurry and best left unexamined. The tools of your trade are basic: a long pole with a hook, a battered rowboat, and a constitution forged in the fires of disappointment. The river police are a tight-knit group, united by shared trauma and a refusal to let the city's filth get the last word. You swap horror stories on slow nights, tales of what the river coughed up, who fainted, and which local dignitary was last seen stumbling away, clutching a suspiciously lumpy parcel. Even on good days, it's hard to ignore what you're wading through. Each shift is a crash course in stoicism. You learn to keep your mouth closed, literally and figuratively, and to treat every ripple in the water with the respect owed to a live wire. Occasionally, you fish out something valuable: a ring, a wallet, a crate of half-drowned oranges. These are celebrated as miracles, a reminder that not everything the river offers is a curse. At the end of your shift, you clean your boots as best you can. Wash your hands, twice if there's soap, and head home, grateful at least to sleep on dry land. Tomorrow, the river will have more surprises in store, and the city will go on pretending that none of it ever happened. In the end, being a Thames constable isn't just a job. It's a daily reminder that sometimes the only way to keep London afloat is to keep fishing out whatever tries to drag it under. If you're poor, your home is a damp cellar with walls sweating brown. Your bedmates are rats, your neighbor is a corpse, and your only luxury is that sometimes the stink outside is worse than the one inside. Welcome to the underbelly of Victorian London, where affordable housing is another way of saying bring your own bucket and a robust immune system. Your journey begins down a flight of slick, broken steps into a windowless room below street level, where the only view is of someone's boots trudging past the grate above. The floor is always wet, the air is always heavy, and if you're lucky, only 2 of your 4 walls are actively leaking. Your mattress is little more than a sack stuffed with hay and regret. It sags in the middle, forming a cozy dip that collects rainwater in winter and mosquitoes in summer. Sheets, if you have them, are hand-me-downs so ancient they might have seen the Norman conquest. Every night you tuck yourself in, you say a silent prayer that nothing in the bedding is currently alive. The rats, meanwhile, do not ask permission. They dart across your toes, rustle through the bread box, and occasionally leave mysterious presents in your shoes. You name them for fun and for company. Privacy is a distant fantasy. You share your cellar with family, strangers, and anyone else desperate enough to chip in for rent. The concept of personal space boils down to elbow room when you're sleeping. If someone dies, and statistically someone always does, you draw straws for who gets to drag the body up to the street, where the parish cart will hopefully remember to swing by. Until then, you try not to make eye contact with the dearly departed in the corner. Food is whatever you can find. Maybe a crust of stale bread. Maybe soup that's mostly water with a faint suggestion of vegetable. On lucky days, a neighbor shares a boiled potato. On unlucky days, you find yourself chewing leather and pretending it's beef. Clean water is a distant dream. Most days, you drink what the landlord swears is filtered, which just means it's passed through a cloth and, with luck, has no visible tadpoles. The stench inside is its own ecosystem. A pungent blend of mildew, sweat, old food, and the ever-present perfume of the Thames. On hot days, the smell rises to greet you, thickening the air until even breathing feels like an effort. If you're very lucky, a breeze will blow in from outside, briefly reminding you that there are worse things than the odor in your own cellar, like the odor in someone else's. You do your best to keep clean, but washing is a rare luxury. A quick rinse from a leaky pipe, a shared bucket, or a borrowed bar of soap is about all you can hope for. Clothes are mended again and again, patched with old curtains, flour sacks, and imagination. Everyone in the room is itchy, scratchy, and just a little bit resigned to living as a host for London's insect population. Illness stalks the slums like a landlord with a grudge. Coughs echo down the corridors, children waste away with fever, and every stomachache is greeted with the silent dread of another funeral. Doctors are few and far between, and when they do arrive, it's usually to announce that there's nothing to be done except move to higher ground or hope for a miracle. Yet, even here, life goes on. Children laugh, neighbors help each other, and the occasional burst of music or laughter drifts up from below. In the face of squalor and stink, the poor endure, stubbornly clinging to the hope that someday, somehow, things might smell just a little bit better. Until then, you keep breathing, keep moving, and keep telling yourself that, one day, the only rats you'll have to worry about will be the ones running Parliament. The wealthy have walled gardens, rose water, and, in extreme cases, country houses to run away to. But in 1858, not even the upper crust can escape the bouquet of Thames, aged 200 years. For the London elite, summer is usually a time to show off. Garden parties, afternoon teas, and polite strolls down perfectly manicured paths. This year, however, the only thing worth flaunting is a well-practiced look of composure while breathing through a perfumed handkerchief. You may have inherited a title, a fortune, and a drawing room filled with Dutch masters, but the one thing you can't buy is a window that doesn't face the river. At first, the wealthy attempt to pretend nothing's amiss. Lady Southwick hosts her Thursday salon as usual, the windows thrown wide to let in the breeze, a strategy that quickly backfires when the first guest swoons into the silverware. The orchestra plays louder, the footmen circulate with extra sherry, and everyone avoids mentioning the subtle note of decomposing eel lurking beneath the peonies. Social etiquette demands that you never let your face betray the truth. Even when the truth is smacking you between the eyes with a bouquet of marsh gas and failed ambition, perfume becomes an act of both fashion and survival. The apothecaries of Mayfair work overtime, concocting special blends with names like Summer Repose, Queen's Relief, or, less poetically, Block the Thames. Every coat, cravat, and curtain is doused in lavender, rosewater, or eau de something stronger. Powdered wigs are lightly dusted with dried herbs. There's a minor scandal when a duchess's spaniel is discovered dunked headfirst in a tub of bergamot. But desperate times call for aromatic measures. Conversation at dinner parties takes on a nervous energy. The subject of the river is strictly taboo, but everyone finds creative ways to tiptoe around it. Have you noticed how lively the city smells this season? One guest inquires, "Nose buried in his soup." Others comment on the sudden popularity of country holidays, the virtues of boarding schools in Scotland, or how very exciting it is to be summering in Bath for the sake of one's nerves. Nobody admits the real reason. The countryside smells like grass and money, while London currently smells like an abandoned cheese shop in July. For those without the means or inclination to flee, denial becomes an art form. Windows are shut tight, and thick velvet drapes, normally used to impress visitors, are now deployed as defensive barriers against the stink. Buckets of vinegar are placed on windowsills to purify the air, a practice that mostly results in the drawing room smelling like salad dressing. Some houses burn incense by the pound, and the smart set invest in newfangled gadgets, air refreshers that look suspiciously like glorified fans, promising to sweep away the stench with the wave of a switch. But even the grandest efforts can't hold back the tide. When the wind shifts, the stink seeps through keyholes, under doors, and into every gilded corner. There are tales of lords and ladies sleeping with their heads under pillows, of midnight escapes to the wine cellar, and of once dignified dowagers caught standing in the garden at dawn, gasping like stranded carp. The panic isn't just olfactory, it's existential. The wealthy pride themselves on being insulated from the city's problems. But the great stink is the ultimate social equalizer. The realization dawns. All the money, titles, and imported roses in the world won't save you if the river decides to pay a visit. Rumours swirl of Parliament finally doing something, but most upper-crust Londoners decide to do what they do best: send for the carriage, pack up the family silver, and head to the country, promising to return when London's air is once again fit for polite society. In the meantime, the rich endure, hiding behind perfume and pretense, learning the hard way that, for one blazing summer, even privilege comes with a scent. Kids don't have Xbox. They have stick and hoop, dead fish races, and the popular new pastime. Find the least disgusting place to breathe. Winners get an extra day without typhoid. For Victorian children, London is one giant playground, albeit one covered in a thin film of historical residue. Streets, alleys, and empty lots all become arenas for youthful invention, mostly because nobody in their right mind would willingly spend all day inside a one-room, sweat-scented tenement with 7 siblings and a grandfather who snores like a dying walrus. Freedom, such as it is, means braving the stench and making the most of what the city offers. And what it offers, mostly, is filth. Children invent games that would horrify modern parents and possibly trigger a visit from several agencies. Stick and hoop is a classic. Run after a rolling metal ring while dodging horse manure, suspicious puddles, and adults in a hurry. For the more adventurous, there's Dead Fish Derby. See who can flick a washed-up fish carcass across the gutter the farthest without passing out. If the wind is right and you hit a cobblestone just so, you might even land your fish in a passing carriage, instantly winning the respect of your peers and the eternal scorn of the local coachman. Then there's find the least disgusting place to breathe. A true test of wit, stamina, and lower lung capacity. This game is simple. Dart around the neighborhood, stick your face into corners, stoops, and behind stacks of crates, seeking out elusive pockets of not completely toxic air. When you find a spot that smells less like death warmed over, you claim it and defend your territory until someone with a stronger nose shoves you off. There are no real winners, but the child who makes it home without a headache is considered something of a prodigy. Nature provides some entertainment, but not the kind you'd hope for. The local wildlife consists of pigeons fattened on questionable crumbs, rats the size of terriers, and street dogs with world-weary eyes. All of them are potential players in impromptu foot races. But everyone knows to avoid the cats, they bite. For a bit of variety, children might scavenge for lost treasures. A cracked marble, a bent spoon, a half-dissolved boot heel, or, on a truly lucky day, a sixpence that's only slightly encrusted with mysterious goo. When the river recedes, the mudflats become the city's accidental amusement park. Children dig for worms, skip stones, and play who can hold their breath the longest, a skill useful for both riverbanks and privies. Sometimes they stage elaborate mock naval battles using driftwood and anything that floats. Parental supervision is minimal. The only rule is to be home before dark, or at least before the next round of night soil is dumped from an upstairs window. Not all games are so active. Some children simply sit on steps and swap stories about who saw the biggest rat, who heard the worst news about the water pump, or which alley is currently haunted by the ghost of Old Man Jenkins, who, as far as anyone knows, is alive and well, just very good at holding grudges and hiding in fog. Urban legends thrive, and the line between game and survival blurs. In all this, children develop a certain resilience, a toughness born from a city that expects them to grow up fast and dodge faster. There are accidents, scrapes, and sick days, but laughter endures, echoing over rooftops, bouncing down the narrow lanes. Even when the stench is at its worst, there's a game to be played, a dare to be taken, and a moment of joy to be wrung from a world most adults are simply trying to endure. If you survive childhood in the Great Stink, you've earned your place in history. And if you ever complain about modern chores, just remember, at least your to-do list doesn't include find a clean place to breathe or don't bring home the plague. In 1858, that's what counted as a win. As night descends, the stink thickens. Every window is open in desperate hope for a breeze. And every breeze is just another slap in the face. There's something uniquely tragic about Victorian London at night. The sun sets with theatrical indifference, and the city prepares itself for another round in the nightly battle against the Great Stink. You'd expect the air to cool, the smells to settle, and the weary to finally find rest. Instead, the heat lingers, turning alleys into ovens and bedrooms into slow-cooking chambers of regret. If you're hoping the darkness will mask the scent, you're in for a disappointment. The Thames may be invisible in the gloom, but it still has ways of making its presence known. Families cluster by their windows, perched like anxious gargoyles on sills and doorsteps. Every curtain is thrown wide, every door propped open, in the vain hope that a kind wind from the countryside might push the city's collective problems somewhere else. On some streets, neighbors gather together, pooling resources, hand fans, posies, the family dog with its nose pressed firmly into a bucket of vinegar. You wave politely to Mrs. Morton across the street, both of you sharing a look that says, "We're all in this together, and none of us is winning." The sounds of the city at night are different too. Normally you might expect the comforting hush of bedtime routines. But this is 1858. The stillness is broken by the slap of wet laundry as desperate souls try to wash their sheets in the cooler air, the distant gurgle of water being flung from chamber pots, and the sharp, sudden shouts as someone misjudges the timing and takes a direct hit. Above it all, the river hums with a low, biological menace, a reminder that you're never truly alone, not even in your own home. Sleeping is an act of bravery. Mattresses, already lumpy and suspicious during the day, become intolerable at night, trapping heat and holding every unpleasant odor like a collector's item. You toss and turn, trying to find a position that will block your nostrils while keeping at least one ear open for rats or ambitious relatives. Children whimper and mutter in their sleep. Adults mutter but don't bother to sleep. You wonder if anyone, anywhere, is dreaming of fresh linen and pine forests, or if everyone has just accepted the olfactory nightmare as the new normal. Candles burn late into the night, their flickering light illuminating the faces of Londoners as they read, knit, or count the hours until sunrise. Some households dab perfume on their pillows, others simply wrap their heads in scarves and hope for temporary unconsciousness. Wealthier families try to bribe sleep with laudanum or a late-night glass of gin. But even the most determined substances struggle against the sheer persistence of the smell. Street life doesn't die down, it changes shape. Night soil men and scavengers ply their trades, slipping through shadows with the practiced stealth of people who would prefer never to be remembered for their work. Cats prowl along rooftops, and the occasional dog can be heard barking furiously at something only it can smell, a feat, considering the competition. Somewhere, a night watchman paces, repeating his calls, probably just to prove he's still alive. And still, the city waits for relief. Rumors ripple through the night. Maybe tomorrow the wind will change. Maybe rain will wash the city clean. Maybe Parliament will fix everything by morning. Hope, like the stink, is hard to kill. So you lie awake, one hand fanning your face, one ear tuned to the rhythm of a restless city, and you try to remember that, no matter how bad it gets, the sun will rise again. If you're lucky, it'll bring a better breeze. If not, well, at least misery loves company, and London is very crowded tonight. London's medical men declare war on myasma. Their weapons, enormous moustaches, dubious tonics, and the conviction that wafting vapours are history's greatest villain. If the summer of 1858 taught Londoners anything, it's that science is sometimes just bravado in a lab coat. The city is overrun by doctors, surgeons, chemists, and the occasional enterprising barber, all ready to battle the great stink, with a curious mix of confidence and confusion. In the age before germ theory, bad air is the enemy, and anything that promises to keep the smell at bay is as good as gospel. Step into the average doctor's office and you'll find a man whose facial hair alone could command a small regiment. The larger the moustache, the more trustworthy the advice. Some moustaches are waxed into intimidating spikes, others curl upward in a perpetual expression of hope. It's widely believed that the hair acts as a natural filter, bravely shielding its owner from the invisible clouds of myasma rolling in off the Thames. The medical arsenal is impressive, if not always effective. Bottles of purple, blue, and green liquid line the shelves, each promising miraculous relief. Tonics claim to purify the blood, fortify the nerves, or renew the vital essence, whatever that means. There are elixirs for the lungs, pills for the bile, and powders to brace the spirits. Side effects include dizziness, vomiting, and in rare cases, a mild improvement in mood. Patent medicine men, charlatans, if we're being honest, pounce on the opportunity. Their carts appear at every street corner, loaded with mysterious vials and loud promises. Cure the stink. Protect your family, they shout, waving bottles of Dr. Fig's fumigating drops, or Professor Blenkinsop's patented air tonic. No one knows what's inside. Most are flavored alcohol, opium, or something best left to the imagination. But the branding is irresistible. If you can't escape the stench, you can at least be mildly tipsy and optimistic about it. The more creative healers experiment with personal accessories. Aromatic pomanders, small decorative balls filled with herbs and spices, dangle from necks, watch chains, or even belts, a sort of Victorian air freshener on a string. Some recommend tying roasted onions around the waist. Others swear by stuffing lavender in every pocket. A few ambitious souls even advocate hanging bunches of garlic in doorways, presumably to scare away both the smell and any wandering vampires. The collective effect is a city that smells, briefly, like a burned salad bar. There's also a fashion for smoke treatment. Doctors recommend burning tar, sulfur, or even gunpowder in closed rooms, convinced that thick clouds of smoke will drive off the myasma. As a side effect, most draperies and mustaches end up lightly singed. It's not uncommon for entire families to spend an evening in a fog thicker than the air outside, everyone congratulating themselves on their scientific rigor while wheezing gently. Meanwhile, some of London's best minds gather for heated debates. Medical journals are filled with letters and diagrams, some arguing for immediate evacuation, others calling for citywide vinegar baths. There are proposals for massive air pumps, citywide fumigation, and even floating gardens on the Thames to refresh the spirits. Unfortunately, the one thing everyone can agree on is that whatever is killing people is definitely not invisible germs, because that would just be silly. Yet amid all this spectacle and speculation, a few quietly observant souls, like Dr. John Snow, begin to suspect there's more to the problem than air. But for most of London, the battle against miasma rages on, led by men whose heroic facial hair is matched only by their optimism. So, the city carries on, coughing politely behind scented rags, popping dubious pills, and trusting the biggest mustache in the room. If nothing else, the great stink proves that sometimes the best medicine is hope, preferably laced with gin and a healthy dose of denial. Just as hope fades, a mustachioed engineer named Bazalgette arrives. Armed with blueprints, a stiff upper lip, and enough optimism to fill the Thames, he promises a new age of plumbing. In the darkest days of the Great Stink, when Parliament is teetering on the brink of mass exodus and Londoners are ready to declare war on their own bathrooms, salvation appears, not in the form of a knight or a prince, but in the tidy, methodical figure of Joseph Bazalgette. His moustache is impressive, his gaze steady, and his belief in the power of civil engineering is nothing short of religious. Bazalgette isn't just any engineer. He's a man with a plan. A really big plan. He spent years studying maps, charts, and all the creative ways a city can accidentally poison itself. He's waded through more reports than a Victorian civil servant, and is one of the few souls in London willing to look the problem squarely in the eye, nose, regrettably, included. When lesser men suggest patching the old pipes or simply dumping more lime in the Thames, Bazalgette shakes his head with the confidence of a man who knows that half measures only make for double the disaster. He assembles his team: draftsmen, bricklayers, and a heroic army of navvies, each one ready to risk life, limb, and personal hygiene in pursuit of something radical: a citywide sewer system. The vision is grand, miles and miles of massive tunnels, strong enough to outlast any politician's promises, all sloping gently toward the sea. Bazalgette calculates every detail, right down to the curve of the bricks and the angle of the pipes. When pressed on why he's making them so large, he reportedly shrugs and says, "One day, London will grow. Best to plan ahead." The man is building for the future, with the cheerful arrogance of someone who trusts math more than luck. But optimism only gets you so far. The work itself is Herculean. Streets are torn up, entire blocks reduced to muddy trenches filled with grumbling workers and curious children peering in. The city vibrates with the clang of picks, the shouts of foremen, and the occasional explosion when someone misjudges the location of a gas main. Londoners grumble about the noise, the mess, and the inconvenience. Never mind that most of them are already experts in inconvenience. Bazalgette, however, persists. He's not just building sewers, he's rewriting London's destiny, one brick at a time. He charms city officials with precise budgets and even more precise sideburns. He reassures the public with calm, practical explanations. He even wins over Parliament by promising, at long last, a summer free from the smell of existential doom. Gradually, the tunnels take shape, snaking beneath the city like veins of hope. There are setbacks, of course. Floods, cave-ins, and workers discovering objects best left to legend. But Bazalgette keeps his cool, always insisting that there's a solution if you're willing to do the math. In the end, his vision prevails. The great intercepting sewers, as they're called, stretch for miles, carrying away the city's woes with a quiet efficiency that's nothing short of miraculous. When the final bricks are laid and the valves opened, London holds its breath, literally. The smell fades, the river clears, and for the first time in living memory, people can walk along the Thames without contemplating a move to the Scottish Highlands. Bazalgette is hailed as a hero, his name etched into the city's history and, more importantly, its new, clean future. So, next time you flush your toilet, spare a thought for Joseph Bazalgette, the man who faced the stink, conquered it, and proved that sometimes the real heroes are the ones with the biggest blueprints and the cleanest sewers. Construction begins. London is torn up, dynamite is involved, and occasionally things go exactly as wrong as you'd expect when you dig under a Victorian metropolis built mostly on swamp, bones, and hubris. If you've ever had to endure home renovations, multiply the chaos by a factor of 10 million, and you'll have some idea what happens when London decides to build its sewers. Streets once famous for stately carriages and dramatic duels are reduced to a series of gaping trenches and ankle-deep mud. Children press their noses to the window, hoping for a glimpse of action, or at least the chance to lob a biscuit at a distracted workman. Bazalgette's vision calls for more than a few modest pipes. We're talking grand, arched tunnels taller than a man, bricked with mathematical precision and optimism. It's an engineering symphony, and the orchestra consists of thousands of navvies, labourers from every corner of the British Isles, each armed with a shovel, an iron constitution, and a willingness to ignore the occasional human bone unearthed mid-dig. Archaeology is not in the job description, so anything older than your foreman gets tossed aside. After all, the dead have already had their chance at London living. Of course, the city's geography is less solid ground and more liquefied history. As soon as the digging starts, the ground oozes, sighs, and at times just collapses entirely. Shoring up a tunnel wall often means wrestling with a layer of Thames mud that seems to regenerate faster than you can clear it. Local rats view the upheaval as a personal invitation, appearing in droves to inspect progress and file complaints about workplace noise. Floods are inevitable. It rains, a tunnel fills, and the unfortunate work crew gets an unexpected bath. Stories circulate about navvies rowing boats through the unfinished sewers, hats askew, spirits undampened, and boots forever lost to the underworld. Some wag in the pub coins the phrase Bazalgette's Navy, and the name sticks, mostly because no one has invented waterproof socks. Then there's the dynamite. Victorian engineers have a complicated relationship with explosives. Used correctly, dynamite blasts through stubborn rock and ancient foundations. Used incorrectly, it blasts through everything, including the occasional pub basement, sending startled drinkers fleeing with foamy pints in hand. Reports of unexpected ventilation become so common that local newspapers run a weekly column called "This Week in Explosive Progress." Above ground, the city is transformed into a maze of scaffolds, cranes, and wheelbarrows. Horse-drawn carts rumble day and night, ferrying away dirt and bringing in bricks. Shopkeepers curse the noise, the dust, and the customers who now have to leap a trench to reach the front door. Wealthier residents complain loudly about property values, while secretly marveling that someone has finally managed to make the stench worse, temporarily at least. Workers eat lunch perched on mounds of earth, swapping tales of near misses and heroic escapes from flooding tunnels. There's a sense of camaraderie and chaos, a shared knowledge that they're building something future generations will neither see nor appreciate, but which, with luck, will allow everyone to breathe a little easier. And yes, things do go wrong. A tunnel caves in, a brick arch crumbles, or a forgotten coffin pops up at an inopportune moment. There are moments of panic and days of back-breaking labor, but the city pushes on, fueled by the knowledge that this is what progress smells like. A heady mix of mud, sweat, and the faint promise of clean air. In the end, despite setbacks, explosions, and the eternal damp, the sewers take shape. Londoners peer down into the darkness, amazed at the sheer scale of what's been achieved. For the first time in living memory, hope bubbles up from below. Proof that with enough digging, a little dynamite, and a lot of nerve, even the oldest city can be remade from the underground up. Not everyone is thrilled. Some Londoners fear the new sewers will unleash demons. Others just want the smell to stop. Everyone has opinions, and they're all wrong. In a city where conspiracy theories travel faster than a horse-drawn cab, and everyone is an expert in things they've never seen, the Great Sewer Project sparks more street corner debates than the price of bread or the existence of Belgium. As trenches snake their way through the city and the ground shudders with distant explosions, the rumors pile up faster than night soil. The skeptical camp is sizable, vocal, and, unfortunately, completely undeterred by facts. At the heart of their concern is the suspicion that disturbing the ancient muck beneath London will summon something far worse than the current aroma. Perhaps a vengeful Roman ghost, a lost colony of plague rats, or, for the truly imaginative, an army of subterranean demons hell-bent on clogging every pipe in Christendom. Pamphlets circulate with ominous woodcuts, horned beasts slithering up drains, devils armed with plungers, the entire city disappearing into a sinkhole of its own making. Some locals swear they've already seen signs of trouble. Mrs. Biddle on Carnaby Street insists her cat has started glowing faintly after a particularly loud sewer blast. A group of gentlemen at the Red Lion pub claims to have spotted mysterious vapours rising from the trenches. Never mind that most mysterious vapours in London are just gin fumes in search of a good story. Religious leaders take turns denouncing or blessing the work, depending on which crowd they're addressing. One week the sewers are a triumph of man's dominion over filth, the next an affront to nature and a certain path to eternal damnation. Even the weather gets blamed. A wet week means the pipes are angering the heavens, while a dry one suggests God is giving us one last chance to repent and move to Surrey. At the other end of the spectrum, there's genuine jubilation. Some residents throw parties the day the sewers reach their street, convinced that salvation, if not indoor plumbing, is just around the corner. Windows are flung open, flags waved, and toasts raised to the future of a stink-free London. The local baker creates commemorative Bazalgette buns, which taste mostly of hope and undercooked raisins. But between these extremes, there's a lot of confusion. Many Londoners, unsure of what the new system will mean for daily life, simply want to know, will this finally stop the annual August evacuation of Parliament? Can I stop dousing my drapes in vinegar? And what happens to the night soil men now that their profession faces extinction? They're reassured that there will always be something in London that needs shoveling, and besides, someone has to keep the pubs in business. Change never comes easy in a city built on tradition and well-composted anxiety. At least one crowd, convinced the city's soul is at stake, tries to stage a mild riot by throwing vegetables into a trench and chanting "No more pipes." The police, used to far rowdier affairs, simply hand out handkerchiefs and remind everyone that a good breeze would fix things faster than a revolution. Over time, as the sewers take shape and the summer air grows less apocalyptic, opinions soften. Even the most stubborn skeptics have to admit that their shoes are cleaner and their lungs less offended. Children stop holding their breath on the way to school. Couples walk by the river for pleasure, not as an act of daredevilry. Londoners, in classic fashion, begin to take credit for the whole idea, and tales of initial resistance quickly morph into stories of staunch civic pride. In the end, everyone's opinions were wrong. Demons remain in the imagination, not the drains. The smell fades, the city recovers, and the only thing truly unleashed is a newfound belief in the power of progress. However noisy, messy, and misunderstood it might be, even with new pipes in the ground, it takes years for the smell to fade. Ghost odors haunt the city, and the legend of the Great Stink becomes every Londoner's favorite story to exaggerate at parties. You'd think that, after months of digging, dynamite, and enough bricks to build a second London, the city would finally smell like roses, or at least like something that didn't crawl out of a forgotten soup pot. But progress, it turns out, moves slower than a Thames tugboat in January. Even after Bazalgette's triumph, London's air doesn't so much clear as rearrange itself. The worst of the stink is gone, yes, but what remains is an olfactory afterimage, a faint, persistent whiff. Like a memory your nose refuses to let go. The new sewers are marvels of Victorian engineering, and they do their work heroically beneath the city's feet. But the world above can't shake old habits or old smells overnight. The first year, the citizens of London are cautious. Some refuse to open their windows, half convinced that the ghost of Stinkmas past will swoop in and reclaim their parlours. Others claim that their drapes, mattresses, and even their children are permanently scented, no matter how much vinegar, rose water, or wishful thinking is applied. The city's street vendors seize on the new reality. Stink-begone sachets and air of progress candles are sold from every corner. Perfume shops rebrand, promising scents that banish the last traces of 1858. Society matrons swap recipes for home deodorizers and hold heated debates over the best way to erase eau de Thames from their drawing rooms. Some say charcoal bowls, others swear by burned coffee beans, and a few embrace the most drastic measure. Moving to Brighton, yet the legend of the Great Stink takes on a life of its own. Londoners, proud of their survival, begin to compete for the best retelling of the summer they all nearly suffocated. At dinner parties and pubs, the tale grows with every telling. It was so bad, my pet canary fainted in its cage. Or, the fog rolled in one morning and I couldn't find my house for 3 days, just followed the stench home like breadcrumbs. Rivalries form over whose neighbourhood suffered most. Southwark claims their cheese market still hasn't recovered. Westminster insists the Commons carpet still has a certain undertone on humid afternoons. For children, the great stink becomes a rite of passage. They dare each other to explore the older alleys at dusk, swearing that some corners still harbour pockets of vintage funk. Hold your breath is both a warning and a game passed down through generations. Local poets, never ones to miss a metaphor, write mournful odes to London's vanished reek, wistful for a time when everyone could agree on what was wrong with the world. Even the city's architecture can't shake the memory. Stately homes undergo endless cleaning. Parliament contemplates reupholstering the chairs one last time. A few clever landlords market their properties as certified post-stench, charging extra for rooms that have finally stopped smelling like a biology experiment gone rogue. Of course, there are skeptics, people convinced that the stink was never really that bad. Or perhaps that it was all an elaborate plot to sell more soap. The city's cynics mutter that every summer still brings a faint return, a little reminder from history to never get too comfortable. You walk down to the river on a hot day and, if the wind shifts just so, you wonder, is that a phantom whiff or just your imagination? But as the years pass, progress settles in. The city grows, the river runs clearer, and people swap their vinegar cloths for fresh bouquets. The great stink, once a daily torment, becomes a punchline, a boast, a lesson, proof that London, for all its mess and madness, can survive just about anything, even itself. Gradually, the rivers run clearer. Life returns to the water. People learn to breathe through their noses again, mostly. Bazalgette is hailed as a hero, and Victorian hygiene gets a little less theoretical. It's not a Hollywood ending, no swelling orchestral music, no grand parade down the Thames. But the change is real, and, for Londoners, almost miraculous. One summer, you're flinching at every breeze, suspecting every puddle, and apologizing to house guests before they even cross the threshold. The next, you're pausing by the riverside, breathing deeply, and discovering the city's air contains, well, mostly just air. It doesn't happen overnight. In fact, it takes years of patience, maintenance, and more than a few awkward mishaps as Londoners adjust to their brave new world of not actively disgusting public spaces. Fishermen, who once stared mournfully at the Thames and saw only floating boots and dead eels, start pulling up real fish again. The water sparkles on sunny days, albeit with the occasional suspicious object still bobbing along, just to keep everyone humble. Swans, which previously emigrated to France out of sheer self-respect, glide back to their ancestral waters and are greeted with more fanfare than visiting royalty. The change isn't just biological, it's psychological. Londoners, who've spent a lifetime treating the river like an open wound, begin to see it as an asset instead of a punchline. Parks and promenades spring up along the embankment, and what was once a gauntlet of stench and sorrow becomes a respectable place to walk your dog, propose marriage, or recover from the existential crisis of Victorian life. Children stop turning, hold your breath into a competitive sport, and discover that running by the river is now only dangerous for the usual reasons. Cobblestones, overzealous geese, and the occasional eccentric poet. In the city itself, life feels lighter. Windows stay open in the summer, curtains fluttering in genuine breezes instead of flapping in alarm. Clotheslines fill with crisp, sun-bleached laundry. No more desperate dousing of vinegar or burnt tar to mask whatever was trying to crawl up the drapes. Neighbors nod in the street. Less from shared suffering and more from a collective, cautious optimism. In parlors, a new topic of small talk emerges: pride. Have you noticed? It doesn't smell like regret today. Yes. and my wallpaper has stopped peeling off the walls from the humidity of pure horror. Bazalgette, meanwhile, gets the rarest prize of all: recognition in his own time. His name is immortalized in the city's brickwork, in statues, and in that peculiar London tradition of naming a pub after absolutely anything. The Bazalgette Arms opens on the embankment, serving pints of sewer's glory and stout of progress. Schoolchildren are marched through the tunnels he built, and more than a few attempt to carve their initials into the bricks. Historians sing his praises, engineers toast his calculations, and anyone with a working nose owes him a silent, grateful cheer. Victorian hygiene, emboldened by this unlikely victory, gets ambitious. Soap becomes less of a luxury and more of a baseline expectation. Baths, actual, honest-to-goodness baths, start appearing in homes. Public health officials take the wild, revolutionary step of insisting that clean water and working drains are good for everyone, not just the aristocracy. Londoners embrace this with the zeal of people who have known darkness and would rather not go back. The legacy of the Great Stink is, ultimately, a city that learns from its own worst mistakes. Londoners take pride in having survived the age of rivers as biohazards. The old jokes don't fade, but they're tinged now with relief rather than desperation. It becomes tradition to scare the grandchildren with tales of the summer when the Thames almost won, and to end every story with the quiet, grateful truth. Sometimes progress is slow, but sometimes, when it finally arrives, it smells absolutely wonderful. So, what did we learn? Don't put your toilet upstream from your parliament. Don't believe everything a mustachioed doctor tells you. And always, always respect the power of a good sewer. It sounds simple in retrospect. After all, entire civilizations have built themselves around the noble art of not living in their own filth. But London, for all its ambition, wealth, and poetic fog, spent centuries cheerfully ignoring one of history's most basic rules. Never underestimate your own plumbing. The Great Stink made this lesson painfully, nostril-searingly clear. First and foremost, geography matters. If you let your sewage flow into the river, and then let the river flow past your city's most important buildings, you're basically begging for a public health crisis, or at least a House of Commons session with a record number of fainting spells. London learned the hard way that, while you can argue about taxes, policy, and the relative merits of cravats, you cannot debate with the current. If your pipes point the wrong way, eventually so does your luck. Second, never, under any circumstances, trust Victorian science with your nose. Mustachioed doctors with heroic confidence in myasma theory prescribed everything from vinegar to burnt onions, with results ranging from ineffective to catastrophic. They could wax poetic about wafting vapors and moral purity, but at the end of the day, nothing beats a proper pipe and a city council willing to sign off on the invoice. Medical advice is a fine thing. Just maybe wait until it stops, including roasted onions as protective talismans. Third, innovation is a double-edged chamber pot. The Victorians loved new inventions, but they also loved not reading the instructions. Early water closets were installed in homes with all the excitement of a royal birth and about as much planning. The pipes led straight to cesspits, which overflowed, then to the Thames, which retaliated by inventing cholera. The city's new motto could easily have been, "If in doubt, dig another hole." Progress is important, but a little foresight, say, an actual blueprint, goes a long way. Fourth, democracy is at its most motivated when everyone's suffering equally. When the working poor could barely breathe in the slums, the government yawned. When the river turned Parliament into a giant scented candle of despair, reform suddenly seemed a lot more urgent. If you want real change, make sure the problem wafts right up to the corridors of power. It's the fastest way to turn a suggestion into a statute. Fifth, never underestimate the stubborn resilience and creativity of a desperate city. When faced with the apocalypse in nasal form, Londoners tried everything: tar, herbs, buckets of vinegar, public prayer, and enough perfume to fumigate a continent. Some ideas were charming, some were dangerous. Most just made things worse. But out of it all came a kind of determined hope, a belief that, no matter how bad things get, someone will eventually invent a gadget, dig a tunnel, or write a law to fix it. And finally, perhaps the most comforting lesson of all, progress stinks before it sparkles. The road to clean rivers and breathable air wasn't pretty. It was loud, muddy, and occasionally explosive. Mistakes were made, eyebrows were singed, and at least one local pub was unexpectedly ventilated. But in the end, London survived, fresher, wiser, and slightly obsessed with sewer capacity. So next time you flush your toilet, run a tap, or walk by a river without gagging, remember the lessons of the Great Stink. Modern comfort is built on the backs of Victorian failure, heroic bricklayers, and one extremely optimistic engineer with a mustache and a vision. Never take your plumbing for granted. Never let your city forget how far it's come. And if your neighbors ever propose dumping something questionable in the river, just smile, shake your head, and hand them a history book. Trust me, the future of your nose depends on it. As you drift off to sleep, let your final thought be gratitude for modern plumbing, clean water, and the comforting knowledge that the only thing your bedroom will smell like tonight is fresh sheets, or maybe your neighbor's cooking. Think of it. The gentle hush of pipes behind the walls, a silent army ferrying away the day's troubles so efficiently you hardly ever notice. You turn on a tap, and out pours clean, clear water. No tadpoles, no mysterious chunks, no risk of existential crisis. You flush the toilet, and your greatest worry is whether someone used the last of the toilet paper, not whether you're about to accidentally invent cholera in your own home. It's easy to take these marvels for granted, but tonight, with the story of the Great Stink lingering in the air, metaphorically, not literally, thank goodness, let yourself appreciate the strange magic of plumbing. You are living in an age of unprecedented cleanliness, an era where hot water is just a twist away, and baths are not a luxury reserved for royalty, but a birthright of the thoroughly modern and mildly exhausted. Gone are the days when a good night's rest required holding your breath, stuffing your nostrils with herbs, and hoping a breeze from the river wouldn't undo all your careful preparations. Your windows can stay open or closed as you please, admitting only the sounds you actually want, crickets, maybe, or the gentle hum of traffic far away, not the ominous slosh of a city in distress. Your bedroom is a sanctuary, soft, peaceful, and gloriously unscented by history's less glamorous moments. If you feel a little smug, that's okay. Your mattress is not infested, your pillowcase has not been used as an emergency face mask, and your dreams won't be interrupted by the distant cries of Gardeloo, echoing through the night. The greatest risk you run is waking up to realize you forgot to put the laundry in the dryer. For most of human history, that would have counted as winning the lottery. Imagine, for a moment, being a time traveler, plucked from the midst of the Great Stink, dropped into a modern apartment, and handed a glass of tap water. You'd marvel at the taste, the clarity, the faint undertones of nothing at all. You'd stare in awe at the shower, running your fingers under the stream, wondering how you'd ever gone without. The idea of a bathroom, inside the house, clean, private, and pleasantly odorless, would seem a fairy tale. And in a way, it is. So tonight, as you settle under your blanket, let the comfort of indoor plumbing wrap around you like a gentle embrace. Let gratitude wash over you with every breath, remembering that comfort is built on the triumphs, mistakes, and sheer stubbornness of countless people who refused to accept that life had to stink. Their struggle paved the way for your serenity. Their misfortunes, recounted and laughed over, have become your lullaby. Let your worries slip away with the knowledge that your bathroom is just down the hall, waiting for you, fresh and ready, no chamber pot or midnight adventure required. You have the right to be clean, to sleep well, to wake up refreshed and free from dread. And if, by some twist of fate, you ever do catch a faint whiff of the past, well, just close your eyes, thank your lucky stars, and promise to buy a plunger at the first sign of trouble. Sleep well, with sweet dreams of clean water, quiet nights, and the endless luxury of a world that finally, mercifully, figured out what to do with its sewage. Good night. You're desperate for relief. Enter the traveling salesman, part apothecary, part con artist, and all sideburns. He offers you miracle powders, mysterious drops, and candles that smell like burning cabbage. None of it works, but at least the placebo effect is strong. Victorian London, when beset by the great stink, becomes a paradise for peddlers of hope in a bottle. If you're tired of vinegar rags and lavender posies, you soon find yourself wandering the market square, where the world's most enthusiastic salesmen line up to save your nose and empty your wallet. Their carts are painted with bold promises. Dr. Peabody's air clarifier, Madame Tilly's aromatic relief for stout nostrils. Each merchant claims his invention is the one true cure for a city drowning in its own aroma. The first thing you notice is the smell. Ironically, even the so-called remedies have their own special bouquet. The scented candles, allegedly made from French beeswax and alpine flowers, mostly smell like damp socks and something that once belonged to a cabbage. Still, the advertisements are persuasive. A single candle will cleanse your parlor, the sign boasts. Also recommended for banishing rodents, unpleasant cousins, and unwanted spirits. For a moment, you wonder if you can get a bulk discount. If you're more of a potion person, there's no shortage of elixirs. Miracle drops, to be added to your tea or sprinkled on your curtains, promise to invigorate the constitution and embolden the sinuses. Most are a blend of alcohol, turpentine, and enough herbs to season a roast. Side effects may include dizziness, fits of optimism, and a sudden desire to start a traveling medicine show of your own. And then, the powders. Oh, the powders. They come in little paper packets, each more mysterious than the last. Some are supposed to be tossed on the fire, filling your home with a soothing vapor. Instead, you end up choking on clouds of what smells like singed lettuce. Others promise to be sprinkled on rugs or bedding, with instructions so vague they might as well read, "Apply generously, then hope for the best." You're left with a fine dusting of disappointment and a lingering suspicion that your sheets will never be the same. Of course, not all remedies are bought. Some are invented at home, passed down by neighbors, or published in newspapers desperate for fresh copy. Suggestions include burning tar in a saucepan, effective but likely to bring the fire brigade, soaking sponges in rosewater and tacking them behind every door, brings the room together with undertones of wet sponge, and stuffing pillows with dried seaweed, a maritime air best enjoyed by the desperate or the delusional. None of these truly solve the problem, but they do give people something to talk about besides the smell. Every now and then, a new craze takes the city by storm. Electric ozone machines become all the rage for a few weeks, their manufacturers promising scientific purification by means of invisible rays. For the low, low price of 2 shillings, you can sit in a room with a whirring contraption that hums, crackles, and occasionally emits a spark, just enough drama to convince you it must be doing something. Whether you feel better is beside the point. At least you have a story for your friends. Despite the wild claims and creative marketing, the most popular cure is, and always has been, wishful thinking. People tell themselves that the smell is fading, that this new powder will finally work, that London will one day be famous for fresh air and floral breezes. It's a citywide placebo, as comforting as any bottle of snake oil. So you light another cabbage-scented candle, close your eyes, and let hope fill the room. After all, if it doesn't fix the air, it might at least distract you long enough to drift into a merciful sleep. In Victorian London, sometimes the best remedy is simply believing you've found one. This year's hottest accessory? The nosegay. A tiny bouquet of flowers or herbs jammed right up your nostrils. Londoners compete to outdo each other with bigger, fancier, and more fragrant nose stuffers, until everyone in town looks like they're about to sneeze or propose marriage to a tulip. In the dog days of the Great Stink, London's streets become the catwalk for a new and peculiar arms race, the battle for the best, smelling nostrils. The fashion pages of the day, ever quick to spot a trend, hail the nosegay as the only accessory more necessary than underwear, and twice as likely to provoke envy. Forget pearls, forget pocket watches. If you want to be noticed, you need a portable garden wedged somewhere between your upper lip and impending despair. It starts small. The first wave of nosegays are modest, a sprig of lavender, a posy of mint, maybe a single daisy for those hoping to channel innocence while dodging airborne misery. Soon, though, the competition heats up. Housewives outdo each other with cunning bouquets of basil and rosemary. Housemaids add a splash of violet, and bachelors sport daring bundles of eucalyptus, claiming it opens the mind and the sinuses. By midsummer, the streets look like a horticultural uprising. The shops can't keep up, herb stalls sell out before breakfast, and desperate Londoners turn to whatever is at hand. Parsley from the stew pot, thyme from the windowsill, and, in extreme cases, entire radishes find themselves pressed into nasal service. A new social class emerges, the nosegay elite, those who can afford imported blooms and the freshest sprigs. Scandal erupts when it's revealed that Mrs. Hargreaves, previously of impeccable standing, was spotted wearing yesterday's marjoram. With every day comes a new innovation. Someone invents a nosegay holder, a clever little clip that attaches directly to your lapel, or, for those with more sensitive noses, hooks artfully onto your moustache. Tailors offer secret pockets sewn into collars for the discerning gentleman. For the children, it becomes a game. Who can craft the wildest, smelliest bouquet? Who will be crowned the prince or princess of fresh air? Not to be outdone, the city's creative types join in. Poets walk around with sonnets wrapped around their bundles of sage. Artists attach tiny painted fans to their arrangements. A notorious dandy is seen at the opera with a corsage the size of a cabbage, requiring a separate carriage for transport, and the unspoken admiration of everyone present. But the nosegay wars are not without peril. Overzealous sniffing leads to sneezing fits, and the local apothecaries see a surge in requests for anti-herbal irritation creams. Bees and wasps, delighted by the floral bonanza, buzz around like drunken party crashers, and at least one reverend is chased 3 blocks by a swarm after winning the coveted Most Fragrant Vicar award. Despite the arms race, there is a communal spirit in the air. Or at least, that's what everyone claims. Beneath layers of hyacinth and bravado, friends trade clippings and tips. Ailing neighbours receive anonymous bundles left on their stoop. For courage, for comfort, for breathing through the day. Even street vendors join the fun, hawking bouquets to banish the blues with all the sincerity of people who know you'll be back tomorrow for another sniff. Inevitably, as autumn cools the city and the stench finally retreats, the nosegay craze fades away. People tuck their wilted bouquets into books as souvenirs, or toss them into the Thames as a farewell gesture. But for that one peculiar summer, Londoners will always remember a time when fashion met survival, and victory went to those bold enough to put a garden up their nose. So if you ever wonder what kept Victorian London going, just picture a million determined faces, each blooming with hope, and maybe a little parsley, in the shadow of the great stink. The fish of the Thames reach their breaking point. Eels develop an attitude. Salmon stage a protest migration. You begin to suspect the river's entire food chain is plotting revenge, and you're pretty sure you saw a carp glaring at you through the fog. It's the summer of 1858. And as the city of London holds its nose and prays for a miracle, the animals of the Thames quietly, and not so quietly, lose their collective patience. Generations of fish have put up with everything. The odd boot, a steady trickle of mystery liquids, and the occasional tipsy bargeman going for an unscheduled swim. But the great stink is different. This is not a seasonal inconvenience, this is an aquatic uprising. It starts with the eels. Normally content to wriggle among the weeds, they now surface in droves, their beady eyes narrowed in unmistakable judgment. Londoners fishing for dinner notice that the eels, once so obliging, now twist around bait with a kind of insulted flourish. The bravest ones slither up on riverbanks and give pedestrians what can only be described as a look, one part accusation, one part existential threat. You did this, their stare seems to say, and we are not amused. Salmon, those eternal optimists, have had enough. Year after year, they've gamely attempted to make their way up the Thames, bravely ignoring the odd piece of floating laundry or dead rat. But now, the entire migration is cancelled. Somewhere near Greenwich, a conference of confused salmon turns around, heads for France, and leaves a note pinned to a log. See you when you sort yourselves out. Sincerely, the fish, even the carp. The unflappable workhorses of the river have become sullen and rebellious. Local children swear they've seen carp leaping clear of the water and flopping across the mud in protest. Fishermen report nets mysteriously cut, lines snapped, and, on one memorable afternoon, an entire crate of sardines left on a doorstep with a note, "For your trouble, with love, the Thames." Seagulls, never ones to pass up drama, join in the protest. Their numbers swell as they flock to the city for what is surely the world's most disgusting all-you-can-eat buffet. Fights break out on the embankment as the birds squabble over the most fragrant morsels. Swans, always above it all, relocate en masse to rural ponds, leaving only a single grumpy specimen behind to glare at tourists. The Thames, once the pride of poets and painters, is now so brackish that even the rats are rumoured to be taking up residence elsewhere. Dogs that used to splash joyfully at low tide now approach the water with all the enthusiasm of a cat at bath time. Even frogs, nature's ultimate survivors, have issued a formal complaint, croaking their displeasure every night in a chorus of disgust. Rumours fly that somewhere beneath Blackfriars Bridge, a secret fish parliament has convened, plotting the next phase of the rebellion. "This is our river," says a local fisherman, but the fish aren't sharing anymore. He gestures at his empty bucket and shrugs. Can't blame them, really. I wouldn't want to live in it either. Children invent new games, pretending to negotiate with the aquatic insurgents. "Take me to your leader," shouts one, poking a stick at a sulking catfish. Neighbourhood legends are born of the golden trout that disappeared in 1858 and is said to return only on the cleanest day, or the eels that grew so bold they started knocking on doors. So, the next time you stroll by a sparkling, fragrant Thames and spot a fish swimming calmly by, remember the summer they all nearly packed up and left. The legacy of the Great Stink isn't just pipes and engineering marvels. It's a river, reclaimed, by people and fish alike, united in the hope that history, for once, will stop repeating itself. The newspapers are having a field day. "The Great Stink conquers Parliament," screams one headline. Cartoonists draw desperate MPs with their heads in buckets. Editorials propose everything from moving the city to France to simply learning to love the smell. If you're a journalist in 1858, The Great Stink is the story of the century. Forget royal scandals or the latest dispatch from Crimea. This is a crisis that practically writes itself and smells twice as strong. Reporters scramble across London with their notebooks, quill pens, and a handkerchief tied firmly over their noses. The presses run day and night, churning out special editions thick with ink, speculation, and just a whiff of melodrama. Each morning, the headlines shout for attention: "Stench forces Commons to flee. London at the mercy of myasma. Aromatherapy. The Queen's new defence?" Rival papers try to outdo each other with ever more creative metaphors. Some compare the Thames to a putrid serpent strangling the city. Others wax poetic about a vaporous assault on civilization. The Evening Standard even runs a serialized novel called The Phantom of the Effluvia, in which a dashing detective battles a mysterious villain known only as the Stench. Editorials overflow with both alarm and ingenuity. Some columnists blame the French, others blame the government, and a brave few suggest that the problem might be closer to home, say, in the way London handles its waste. But that's just a little too practical, and besides, there's more fun to be had in outlandish solutions. One writer suggests moving Parliament to a floating houseboat on the North Sea. Another proposes bottling the air and selling it as a Victorian cure for complacency and weak constitutions. The public eats it up, sending letters to the editor by the sackful. Favorite topics: why don't they just put a lid on the river? And has anyone considered simply holding their breath until September? Cartoonists, meanwhile, are having the best summer of their careers. The illustrated weeklies are packed with scenes of MPs fainting daintily on the House floor, their faces awash in horror and bad air. Parliamentarians appear with clothespins on their noses, debating sewer reform with tears streaming down their cheeks. The Prime Minister is depicted heroically brandishing a mop, a true champion of the people, while mysterious brown clouds creep ominously through the city like villainous stage smoke. Of course, the coverage isn't just for laughs. Reports on the impact of the stink bring the miseries of the poor into middle-class parlours. Articles detail the overflowing cesspits, the desperate night soil men, and the unfortunate souls whose homes are unlivable. Heartbreaking stories of children struck down by cholera or families driven out of their homes are published alongside handy tips for deodorizing your drapes. But the line between news and entertainment is blurry. Rumours spread faster than the stench itself. Miasma sightings are reported from as far away as Scotland. One anonymous letter claims a resident's canary learned to talk just to beg for a window to be closed. Gossip columns ponder which society hostess has the most effective scented candle and which members of Parliament are secretly seeking refuge in their country estates. In the end, the newspapers become the city's collective diary, chronicling London's journey from denial to outrage to, finally, a grudging sense of humour. After the Great Stink passes, editors look back on their summer of glory, proud to have survived, and, more importantly, to have sold more papers than ever before. So if you ever doubt the power of the press, remember, it wasn't just engineers and politicians who saved London from its own excess. It was the tireless hacks, the wisecracking cartoonists, and every citizen who wrote in, demanding that something, anything, be done before the city simply drowned in its own headlines. So tonight, as you settle into your clean bed, listening to the soft hum of modern plumbing and the gentle absence of Victorian rivers, maybe send up a quiet thank you to the unsung heroes of history, the engineers, the dreamers, and the ordinary people who somehow survived the worst-smelling summer London ever endured. Think back to those dog days of 1858. Politicians with vinegar, soaked rags on their faces, children inventing games just to avoid puddles, and the entire city collectively holding its nose, while the Thames burbled by with secrets best left undisturbed. The Great Stink was a disaster by any measure, but it was also a turning point. Out of misery, chaos, and several thousand panicked members of Parliament came a triumph of engineering and sheer human stubbornness. There's something oddly comforting about it all. The knowledge that, yes, things were truly disgusting, sometimes catastrophically so, but people didn't just curl up and wait to be overwhelmed. They argued, improvised, built, and occasionally fainted dramatically. And when it was all over, they left behind a city, cleaner, stronger, and ever so slightly less smelly. Maybe that's the real lesson of the Great Stink. Progress doesn't always arrive in a cloud of glory. Sometimes it drifts in on a hot, foul breeze and forces everyone to change, not because they want to, but because they can't hold their breath any longer. So as you drift off, remember how far we've come. From the era of perfumed nosegays and terrified eels to a world where you can trust your tap water, and the worst thing you'll ever flush is a forgotten goldfish. History may be gross, but it's also proof that people, at their core, are stubborn, hopeful, and just clever enough to survive anything, even their own mess. Sleep well, and may your dreams be clean, your rivers clear, and your air forever unscented by history's less glamorous moments. Good night.